sunshine.
It's my first proper musical memory where something really hit me in the head and the heart at the same time. It was either a song that I heard on Saturday nights when my parents had had a few too many sherries, or you heard it on a Sunday morning when the smell of the Sunday roast was coming up through the house and I was still in bed, and my mum was just pretty much a kitchen singer. You know, she used to belt them out in the kitchen, and when she was cooking she always sang, and this song would go on every Sunday morning and it would get repeated as well. I think it started my obsession with melody. The song just makes you feel free of any kind of doom or kind of bad result in life. It just makes you just feel like you're walking on air. Music kind of unlocked me a tiny bit. It made me come out of myself, I suppose.
So musically, you were very much inspired by the music that your parents played?
I start off like that. I think a lot of people that get into music or make music their living are fed music by their parents. And I've chosen a lot of stuff that kind of I can remember from the age of around about 7 to 20, things that really affected me.
Your next song is, I guess, inspired by your mum, from what you were saying, Elvis Presley and Crawfish.
I remember me and my mum used to watch lots of films and lots of sport together. And she made me sit down and watch King Creole, an Elvis Presley film. And I loved it. I gotta say, I thought it was an amazing film. I was disappointed with every subsequent Elvis film after that, actually. And the film kind of starts with this song, Crawfish, and it's a duet with Jean Bilbrew. Her voice in it is amazing. It's a proper duet. And Walter Matthau's in the film. I ended up loving him because then I saw him in The Odd Couple and stuff. So it's all bound up with those kind of memories. But I think Elvis really hits home to me because my mum was a massive Elvis fan, along with lots of people in the valleys and everywhere else in the world. And when he died, it was such a seismic thing in my house. You know, my mother and father took a day off work to pay their respects when Elvis passed away. And that's when I realised how much music could really matter to people. And this was the first Elvis Presley song that I kind of digested. This is a really kind of dark, authentic kind of sound to this song. It's got a real rootiness to it. And yeah, it's my first resonant kind of Elvis Presley memory. This song, I think, represents suddenly finding freedom in my own little kind of fiefdom in the valleys in Wales. You know, you turn 18 and you feel as if you can take longer bus journeys, you can go to nightclubs, you can go into a pub on your own. And I remember going to this nightclub in Newport called Rudy's, which used to do like a Motown night. And I remember I was in Rudy's one Friday night, and I remember I heard this song, The Hunter Gets Captured by the Game. So I went and asked the DJ who the song was by, and he told me it was by the Marvelettes. So I kept repeating that in my head so I wouldn't forget it by the morning, kind of thing, bearing in mind that this is 1987, I think. So I didn't have any dictaphones I could speak into or anything like that. And then, I went and tracked this down on an album, and then I realised it was written by Smokey Robinson. He's kind of got that knack, Smokey Robinson, of when he writes a song for somebody else, it still kind of sounds like him. And I think this song really started me on a road to becoming probably obsessed with quite a lot of Motown stuff and a lot of Motown obscurities and stuff. And yeah, I just think this is just the skill and the craftsmanship in this record is just beyond, anything of that era, I think.
Totally agree. Next, a song from a band that you presented a documentary about on Six Music.
Yeah, this is another band that comes through discovering something in my mum and dad's record collection. My mum and dad had a 7-inch single by a band called Badfinger, and it was a song called Come and Get It. So I used to play that now and again when I was young. That was their first hit, and it was written by Paul McCartney. And subsequently, they went on to write amazing songs. And I remember, hearing this song when I was young because of my mum and dad's record collection. And then I got into them when I was about 15, 16. I went and bought some of their albums. And I suppose subconsciously I was looking for other groups that were from Wales that had kind of made it, so to speak, just as a way of encouraging myself to know that people from Wales could be as big as groups from England and all that kind of stuff and everything. Because when you're a kid, you just kind of need that role model, I suppose. And then I just bought all their records. And it's a tragic story. Badfinger wrote the song Without You, which is obviously a massive hit for Harry Nilsson and Mariah Carey, one of the most played songs of all time. But they didn't really see any reward or money from it. It seems as if that they were forgotten for a while, but in the last 10 years or so, people like Martin Scorsese has included their songs in some of his films. I mean, like this song, Baby Blue, is included in the film The Departed. It was also included in one of the end episodes of Breaking Bad. You know, they're a band that's had their resurgence, that people are realising how important they were, you know, and this song was a massive hit in America too. So I just think it's one of those undiscovered gems. They were such a great band and they deserve a bit more credit than they get. I remember Sean Moore, the drummer in Manic Street Preachers. Sean had a copy of Out of the Blue by Electric Light Orchestra, ELO, in around about 78. And I was just hooked straight away. Yeah, he was playing the cassette of this all the time in the house, and it had songs like Sweet Talking Woman on it, It's Over, Turn to Stone, Mr. Blue Sky, and this, Wild West Hero. I mean, all those singles on one album is amazing. And I think ELO were the first group that I got into as a band. You know, I started buying all their records. And it's a bit Alan Partridge, you know, when he says that Wings are the band that the Beatles could have been. Well, I definitely thought that about ELO for a long time. You know, records that have been on my turntable all my life. And he just had a knack of writing lyrics that connected to me sometimes. I mean, this lyric on Wild West Hero, it definitely kind of appealed to my inner Charlie Brown. You know, it gave me company in feeling like I was always out of my depth in life, you know, at that age kind of thing. And so it really struck home to me.
Next song from someone who we sadly lost this summer, Ennio Morricone.
This song is something, again, which I encountered through watching TV with my mum. It was on the opening credits for The Life and Times of Lloyd George in early 80s, 1982, 81, I'm going to say. And the opening credits would always start with Chai Mai by Ennio Morricone. And it's just one of those pieces of music that just grabbed me. It just seemed to describe eternity. You know, the opening credits had Lloyd George walking through the streams and waterfalls of Cricketeth, where he lived, etc. And just the music was just sent me off into a dreamscape which I've probably never recovered from. And then I realised, you know, Chai Mai had been used on so many other films and so many other TV series. And it got appropriated for this, for the story of Lloyd George. And he was played by a Welsh actor called Philip Maddock, who did a brilliant job. And Lloyd George, again, was a Welsh hero because obviously he's our only ever Prime Minister. And, you know, my mum made me watch it, and it had an historical importance to me growing up in Wales. But also the music just seemed to describe the complicated nature of his life as well, and the achievements in his life. And subsequently, you know, I think if you listen to some Manic Street Preacher songs like Everything Must Go or Design for Life, you can definitely hear Morricone influences in there. Or there's a song on my new record called Under the Mimosa Tree, where you can hear Morricone's fingerprints all over it. It's not something you try to do, it's just something that happens by osmosis. If something hits you that hard when you're young, it just becomes part of your DNA. And this music definitely just became part of my DNA straight away, I think. This is a band I started getting into around about 1984, 83, when I was starting to read the music press, which was a big deal for me because suddenly I was reading quite academic dissertations on why music was good or bad. It was a big thing for me, you know, reading The Enemy and Melody Maker and Sounds. And they started to inform me. And then I discovered this band through the music press, Big Country. And then I realised that the guitar sound was the same. And then I realised that Stuart Abinson in Big Country had been the guitarist in the Skids. And I just really, really started a massive love affair with Big Country. And me and Nicky Wire got into Big Country lots. And the album The Crossing was a bigger widescreen image to the music than usual. There was a bit more ambition to what Big Country were doing. And the band was such an identifiable force. Bruce Watson on guitar, Tony Butler on bass, Mark Brzezicki on drums. All amazing musicians and cool dudes, you know, in their own right. They were a real band. And I remember my parents used to go out on a Friday and Saturday, and I'd push all the furniture back to the walls of the living room, and then I'd put the record on as loud as possible, and that's where my air guitar career started, you know, to this album. And I would jump all around the living room. It was like, you know, a really silly, pathetic little village dance scenario where I'd pushed all the furniture back against the walls. And kind of, you know, Stuart Abinson was described as the Scottish Jimi Hendrix. To be honest, I think he was something much more unique than that. Nobody else has ever sounded like Stuart Abinson ever again. And of course, Stuart's life ended way too quickly. But yeah, this is again, a massive formative influence.
Another great 80s band for your next choice, the Waterboys.
Yes, the kind of gateway for getting at the Waterboys was Mike Scott being on the cover of The Enemy. And I remember reading an interview with him, and he was such a cool dude. And, you know, the way he kind of talked in his interviews was so cool. And I just went and bought a record on the basis of just an interview. The album, In a Pagan Place, and they had this track in it called A Church Not Made with Hands, which just feels like the most beautiful, charging, optimistic kind of steed just running towards you, and then you feel as if you can just jump on it into the distance. That's the effect this song has on you. And years later, a very strange thing happened to me. I was on a plane going to Latvia for a festival, and this head just bent down and said, "I got your fan letter, you know." And I looked up, and it was Mike Scott. I thought, what the hell's going on here? Then he just walked up the aisle. And then I realised I'd written a fan letter to him in 1985, and I'd burnt the edges of the fan letter, and he was just unbelievably pretentious. That just blew my mind and really unnerved me. So I saw him at the baggage collection when I got off the plane, and he was like, "Yes, I remember a couple of quotes from it about..." And I was like, "Okay, stop right there. Don't remind me of anything I ever said in the letter," because it was so embarrassing. I remember putting stuff in there like, you know, "I will retrieve the full stops that Jack Kerouac chucked away when he wrote On the Road," and stuff like that. Just really silly stuff. And it was really, really so cool that he proved he was the kind of guy that read most of his fan mail and stuff. Sean, as I've said before, Sean Moore, the drummer in Manics, he was a massive influence on me musically. And he had got into Echo and the Bunnymen, and he'd started doing his hair like Ian McCulloch, and Richey started doing the same too. And then we all went to see Echo and the Bunnymen in Bristol. And this was my first ever gig. And it was Sean's first ever gig. It was Richey's first ever gig. And I remember we were all stood outside the stage door listening to soundcheck. And they did this. They did, you know, the cutter in soundcheck. And there's a bit in the middle of the song that goes, meow. Well, when you're 16 or 17, you think, how does Will Sergeant do that on the guitar? And then after soundcheck, obviously, all the lads from the Bunnymen came out. And we got all their autographs, and, you know, they went off to the pub, and we were just stood there astounded, myself, Sean and Richey. Nick didn't come to that gig. And yeah, that's one of my most special memories of my life. And this is an amazing record. Ian McCulloch, you know, speaks his own language when he writes lyrics sometimes. And it was produced by Ian Brodie. People forget he's an amazing producer too. A lot of these records I've chosen are from the 80s, and it just makes you realise what amazing music from the 80s. Just, you really can't beat some of these songs.
So you very recently released your second solo album called Even in Exile. 14 years after your debut solo album. Why so long for a follow-up?
I didn't really want to do a solo album, as simple as that. I did the first solo album because Manic Street Preachers took a break. And when I realised that I wasn't going to be doing anything with the Manics for a year or two, I had a panic. And the same thing happened with this one. We took a bit of an enforced break because we've been going for so long. We've all got families. I think more than anything, we're aware that sometimes an audience needs a break from us more than anything. So around about 3 years ago, I knew that this was coming. There was a bit of a break in the Manics kind of cycle. And I was subconsciously looking for something to do. And this kind of fell into my lap to collaborate with Patrick Jones, who's Nicky Wire's brother. These words fell in my lap. It was a subject I connected to, that I knew a lot about. And I just did it straight away, you know. And we've got our studio here in Wales. And it was just a dream to do. It was lovely. It was beautiful.
And it loosely traces a story of the life and death of Victor Hara. For those who haven't heard of him, who was he?
Victor Hara was a boy that was born into what you might call the plantation class in Chile. So when he was born, not much was expected of him, but through the help of his mother, he raised himself up, went to university, became a theatre director, and he learned how to play guitar and sing and write songs on his mother's guitar. And then he went on to become this very influential figure in Chile between the mid-60s and the 70s. He became a very, very informed political activist. But his songs really touched people. Some of it is like early Tim Buckley, but a lot of his songs were very, very politically, ideologically and socially informed. And then, obviously, there was a military coup in Chile in 1973, and he ended up being murdered by the Pinochet coup. So there is a story that is tell about him, and the album tells a story about his life.
How did you come to hear of him?
Well, in the 80s, he was written about a lot. I like to say to people that I was not the first musician to write about Victor Hara. Working Week from the 80s, wrote a song dedicated to him. You have people like Robert Wyatt covering his songs. Clash wrote a song that included him in one of their lyrics. Simple Minds dedicated a whole album to him. U2 wrote a song about him. Lots of people have been writing about Victor Hara. He's been connecting to musicians, in every other part of the world since his death in 1973.
And you just mentioned Simple Minds, who did dedicate their album Street Fighting Years to him. And it's a Simple Minds track that we're going to play now.
Yeah, I started discovering Simple Minds when I used to listen to Radio 1 in the evenings, Kid Jensen, Janice Long, John Peel, where bands would do sessions for them and stuff. And you started realising that Simple Minds were this very experimental band. And then they went on this journey where they connected to a massive audience around the world. They had this amazing journey, Simple Minds, of just starting out as a krautrock experimental band and then morphing into one of the biggest stadium bands in the world. I think this song represents the bridge between that journey they took between experimental and stadium band. I remember just hearing this song and just going, they sound unstoppable. Before that, they had released songs like I Promise You a Miracle, Glittering Prize, Love Song. But this just sounded like it was just full of grace, splendour and unstoppable power. And I've tried to discover the chords to this song, but it doesn't seem like it's a song in the traditional sense. It's just a statement of intent or a statement of joy. And it's just a particularly unique record, I think.
Well, let's hear it then. This is Simple Minds and Speed Your Love to Me. James Dean Bradfield's new album, Even in Exile, is out now. And thank you for sharing your tracks of my years this week, James.
Thanks very much. Thank you.